In this section, we are going to see how you can teach segmentation, one of the most fundamental concepts in marketing, while capturing your audience attention by using their own data. So first, let's summarize quickly what segmentation is all about and why it matters in marketing. And for that, I'm going to go to Enginius and open one of the tutorials about segmentation, so we can have an example dataset and access to the tutorial in PDF format, and we can talk about something concretely. So segmentation is the idea that people can be classified, ranked, measured on many different dimensions, such as preferences, past behavior, desires, willingness to pay, preferences, and so on. And we're going to find groups of individuals with about the same needs and preferences, so that it's easier to deal with these groups than with the variety of customers who are all different. And so what we're going to segment is that segmentation data over here. The example we are seeing here is Office Star. Think about a kind of Office Max example, and in a survey we ask people, okay, to what extent is variety of choice important to you, or finding electronics, or the quality of service in the store, or the how easy it is to activate the return policy. And customers have answered that survey. Some care a lot about some dimensions, while others do not at all. And we're going to try to find groups of individuals within that population to summarize the data and make marketing strategy more effective and more targeted. So when we launch a segmentation analysis, what we do is we select how many segments we want to have, or we let the software decide by itself, and we specify where the segmentation data is. Sometimes on top of the segmentation data, we might have discriminant data, for instance, income, age, sociodemographic information, and we might also decide to classify other customers into segments, and that's classification analysis. I'm not going to run those. I'm just going to focus on creating the segments by themselves. So you click Run, and it will automatically not only segment the population, decide how many segments are best. In this case, it's 3, and I'm not going to the details of the dendrogram and how we know it's 3 and not 4. Everything is explained in other documents and in the tutorial. And basically, we end up with a description of 3 segments which summarize pretty well the variety and the heterogeneity in the customer population. So for instance, cluster 2 has about 1/3 of the respondents to the survey, and they really care about low prices and easy to use return policy, while having access to electronics or furniture in the store is not as important. So that's basically segmentation analysis in a nutshell. We could go into much deeper into how to run that and exactly how you select the number of segments, how it's used in marketing, and so on. However, here is the issue. It can be quite dull to teach segmentation to a group of students. It can be a bit boring too. So what I like to do is to use a psychological trick to get my students, my audience, highly interested in the topic. And the trick is as follows. Imagine you are at a gala dinner, and there is a lot of noise, plenty of people are talking around you. You cannot distinguish any conversation whatsoever, except maybe that at your table. And then suddenly, 2 tables away from you, you clearly hear your name. And so suddenly, you can pay attention to that, right? You hear your name, you listen to what's happening, and you focus on that part of the conversation. And the reason is simple. We are wired to pay attention when someone is talking about us. And that's exactly what I do when I teach segmentation studies. What I try to do is, instead of teaching segmentation in a vacuum, I try to segment my audience. And I've learned, especially with executive education participants, that approach is extremely effective to capture their attention when we talk about segmentation. So what do I do? And again, it could be transposed to many different audiences. Here I'm going to use executive education participants, specifically executive MBA students, and I'm going to run a study, a quick survey, asking them, why are you here? What are your motivations to join this executive MBA? And you might think that everybody have about the same motivations. Actually, no. They differ significantly in terms of expectations and motivations and reasons to be there. And that's exactly what we're going to segment. So the entire exercise takes about half a day, maybe a little more if you want to go slow with your audience. So the thing we do is we design an online survey together. I'm going to show it to you. Then I ask them to answer the survey, usually right before the break. So we have an online link and we share it with the group. They answer the survey, they go on a break. During the break, I prepare the data for analysis. You have to do a few housekeeping things. It's quite easy to do, but you need to know how to do them. And then I take the clean data and I distribute it to my participants. Then when they come back, I go into a quite lengthy and slow demonstration of how to use the segmentation software in Enginius, and then from there I send them the data and I ask them to do a quick case study. It takes about 2 hours if you want to do it well, maybe a little more. And so in that case study, I ask them to identify how many segments of participants are in the group, how can you describe these segments, to give a name, to select a picture, to describe the segments, even sometimes to create some kind of persona, and from there, what kind of modifications could you think of to improve the exec MBA program for that specific segment, which is a very nice introduction to the idea that marketing strategy should be tailored to different profiles of customers, and what better ways to find these different profiles than to run a segmentation study. So let me walk you through the process step by step and show you how it works. So usually I use Google Forms. It's very easy to use, it's free, everybody knows how to use that, and the survey is very straightforward. So I ask them in the classroom, why are you here? Or even better, why do you think others are here? Which usually elicits better answers. And so if you look at the kind of suggestions I've had in the past, people said, oh, some people come here to network and meet different people, or they come here for the reputation of the school because they want to change company, because they want to accumulate knowledge. Some are cost driven, some are location driven. And so by just talking to your audience, you identify different kinds of motivations and criteria that people had in mind when they joined the exec MBA or any kind of program you are thinking about. Some are thinking about launching their own companies, others want to obtain a promotion. And so we list all these factors together on a scale from 1 to 5, and I ask them later on, what's the most important to you, or what's important to you? And I specifically ask them, please don't give a 5 to everything. That would be pointless. Let's make sure you think carefully about why you are here, what matters to you and what doesn't. On top of that, I ask a few demographic questions that would be called discriminant questions such as gender, location, age. Usually the results are a bit disappointing because the audience is quite homogeneous on those dimensions, and so the discriminating factors are few and not very effective. So once we agree on the survey, I go back and I share the link with them. So I just come here, I get a shortened URL, it's easier, and then I share that link on the course website, or I send it by email to the participants, and I ask them, remember, it's anonymous, answer the survey, and once you're done, you go on a break, take a coffee break, and we'll meet in 20 minutes. So I have the data comes automatically into that kind of format, but that's not what I want. I want actually the raw data so that I can prepare it for segmentation analysis. So you click here, view responses in sheets, which is, as you most likely know, is a kind of online Excel done by Google, and that's the format the data appears in. Now, as you can see, there is a lot to prepare and clean. For instance, the headers are gibberish and contain a lot of nonsense. So to edit that, the easiest way, as far as I'm concerned, is to just download the file as in an Excel format. I do that, and here I am. So there are a few things I need to do. First of all, to have something that is meaningful and useful, you need to clean up the headers. And the easiest way to do it is to take that part, copy, and then go to replace and say I want to replace all those texts by nothing. And by doing that, all your headers are pretty much cleaned. Then you do the same for the end bracket, and all your headers are clean. That's exactly what we wanted. Now, to facilitate analysis later on, the timestamp is useless. It's obviously not a segmentation variable. So I'm going to put an ID there, which will simply be 1 to 2, 3, 4, and so on. There are faster ways of doing it, but that's how I'm doing it. So I have a number from 1 to 316. As you can see, actually I'm using the same survey over and over the years, which means that the data set becomes bigger and bigger every time I run the survey, which makes the analysis even more interesting. Just to make sure, I copy the values, not the formula, so we have IDs from 1 to 300 something. Now, I need two separate data blocks. The first data block for the segmentation variables, and the second one for all the demographics. So I need to separate them. However, I need to make sure I retain the ID across these two data blocks. So this is what I'm going to do. I insert new columns, and I copy paste the ID over there. Okay, now it's done. And finally, I'm going to take that entire data block of demographics and cut and paste to the end of my file over here. So I have one data block of segmentation variables, and then I have a second data block of sociodemographics. The nice thing about Enginius is that if you have missing values or if you have text, it will automatically deal with it. You don't have to, for instance, you don't have to manually code male into 1 and female into 0. It's done, the dummification of the data is done automatically. You don't have to care about that at all. Now, the trick, I'm going to save that data on my desktop over here, And that's the dataset I want to send to my students and import into Enginius to run a segmentation analysis. Let's do that. So I'm back in Enginius and I need to load the ExecMBA dataset for a segmentation study. I just go to load. My data is in the Excel spreadsheet I've just saved, so I'm going to find it and load it. And you will notice that Enginius will automatically recognize that you have separate data blocks, and the reason is you have space between the two data sets and they have different formats, so it automatically identifies you have two data blocks and they need to be treated separately. So on the one hand I have my segmentation data, I'm going to rename it for clarity, and then I have my demographics over there. So what I'm asking my students to do is to look at the data, run a segmentation analysis with 2, 3, 4, 5 segments. Of course, there are tools to decide statistically what is the best number of segments, but actually from a managerial point of view, you have to explore different options and decide on which one you're going to stop. So what we need to do is to identify segments in that population, right? To do so, you click on segmentation here. I've experienced different strategies, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments. Actually, you should ask your students to do that and explore how many students there are in the data set. I'm going to go with 4. Actually, there is a whole process to identify how many segments you should have. The segmentation data is the first data block. That's fine. I don't need to standardize the data because obviously I've been using the same scale for all the questions, so no need to standardize here. And in terms of discriminant analysis, yes, I have discriminant data, and you can find it in demographics over here. There is one small issue, however. If you segment the data like that, it's not going to lead to very interesting results, at least not all the time. The issue is that many people use the scales differently. So some will answer between 1 and 5, and some will answer between 4 and 5. And we all know that it's not a good way of answering the data. So one nice feature in Enginius is that you can standardize the data in an advanced manner. Especially here, you can standardize by row, which means that we are going to standardize within respondents and make sure that we identify the most important features versus the least important features for each individual, which is usually you need to do it by hand beforehand, but here the option is embedded automatically in the software, which simplifies a lot of things, especially when you use that kind of data. So you run the analysis, it will standardize by row, make sure that we make features comparable across respondents, and we explain the data transformation here. It shows the 4 segments I've decided to keep. And again, usually what you do is to run with 2, 3, 4, 5 segments, and you look at the results and decide where you should stop. Actually, if you went to 5 segments, you would split that big chunk of people into 2 additional segments. That's something you could do. And the key is to look at that table. That shows you how many people are in each segment, which size is each segment, but also what's especially important and more and less important to everyone. And you have the data in graphical format over here. That's exactly the same thing, what is above the average compared to the rest of the population and what is below. And so what I ask my students to do is to look at that data and then to give life to the segments. By the way, remember, we are talking about the students in the classroom as we speak. So it's kind of interesting because they know they have been classified into one of these 4 segments. I'm not going to the details here, but if you just look at the major differences between segment 1 and segment 2, for instance, in segment 1, what is most important is changing company, changing career, and broadening your horizon. Everything else is either average or below average. So these people in segment 1 are the movers. They want to move out, change career, go to a different company, and to do that they need a degree, or at least they think that an executive MBA degree will help them achieve that goal. On the other hand, segment 2, which by the way is in the exact same classroom taking the exact same courses. So it's a great illustration of the variety of preferences you face in the marketplace and how hard it is to design one product for all, one product fit all. For those guys, changing company, changing career, it's completely pointless. Increasing the salary is not even important to them. However, they are practical. The location of the program, the ranking of the program is important. And the reasons they are here is for, personal reasons, to gain some international perspective, to improve leadership skills, to benchmark themselves for personal development. Others are startuppers. They want to launch a startup. Others are on different paths. And so I'm asking them to describe each and every one of those segments to the rest of the class, which is interesting because sometimes they select the same number of segments, very often actually, but they describe them slightly differently. Let me show you quickly some examples of the work they've done from that kind of data. So this is the kind of presentation we get at the end. Some are pretty funny, some are much more serious. The idea is to create a persona describing each and every segment and the kinds of things you should be doing. I've been running that exercise over the last 3 or 4 years, and from beginning to end it takes about 4 to 5 hours with good groups of high quality. What's interesting is that I've had reports that were of better quality than some consulting reports I've seen. And one of the reasons, I guess, is because they are highly interested. They know we are talking about them, and they know the subject matter. They get interested from the get-go, and they find that kind of exercise absolutely illuminating. What I do next, after that, usually the next day, after debrief, is to show them other examples, maybe more professional examples of segmentation, reminding them that we use exactly the same kind of approach in market research companies, and what they've done is actually what marketing researchers do when they segment a market. Now, why does it work so well? Because it does work very, very well, especially with exec ed participants. Well, first of all, we are talking about them, and it's not yet another Apple/yogurt/car case study. It's novel, it's new, it's quite interesting. They know the context. They don't need to learn the context from a 30-page case study. They are customers, they are participants, they've researched the market before deciding on a specific executive MBA program, so they know what they're talking about. And also I found that because Enginius is so easy to use, it allows us to focus on the problem rather than focus on the software. So being able to have the software there in real time, but kind of in the background. It's not the focus of the teaching exercise. The focus is really themselves. It helps quite a lot. On top of that, they go home with a toolbox. They can go back and actually run segmentation studies on their own data. But above all, it's about them. and there is a citation, a quote from Anatole France, which I love. People are criticized for talking about themselves, yet this is the subject they know best. So use that to your advantage when you teach. Talk about your audience, and you will see a marked difference in terms of attention to your lectures and exercises.